Oh, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll be waiting a couple of minutes until we have more participants logging in. Take time to grab a coffee, water. We have another hour and a half of an exciting panel. Okay, another minute or so. So grab water myself. Okay, I think we can get started, so we can dive into the content. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'll just presentation here. So this is a session presented by Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada, presented in partnership with the Legacy Leadership Lab and the Co-op Convert project on social acquisitions for business recovery, and we're looking at the case for cooperatives. Before we start, I wanted to cover some housekeeping notes and mention that this webinar is being recorded. We will be having two versions, hopefully, in French and in English. So I mentioned we have simultaneous interpretation today. We are joined by Olivier Lepage, who will be with us throughout the webinar. The slides and the recording will be shared with every participant, and we encourage you to add your comments and questions using the chat and Q&A boxes. Also, do make sure to select all panelists and participants so that everyone can read your comments. And again, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. And before I continue with some introductions, I'll briefly say I'm Nadia Junit. I am with Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada. I'll go in depth a bit later, but wanted to give you a brief overview of our agenda today. After the introductions, I will be providing some context on Cooperative and Mutuals Canada's role in the Investment Readiness Program. Then we will have a 30-minute presentation by Co-op Convert, followed by another 30-minute presentation by the Leadership Legacy Lab. And then we'll finish with a 15 to 20 minutes question and answer period towards the end. Before we proceed with introductions, I wanted to recognize that Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada headquarters is located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. We extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples for their valuable past and present contributions for this land. And we also recognize and respect the cultural diversity of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. So I'll move on with introductions. So I will be the facilitator. So I'll just facilitate the different questions and comments. I am a part-time consultant on behalf of the Cooperation Council of Ontario for Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada. I am the focal point on the Investment Readiness Program for the cooperative sector. And so, as we all know, there's a growing network for Canadian organizations and professionals that are exploring social acquisition for business recovery, a strategy that sees conventional enterprises transition into social purpose enterprising form, including cooperatives. So today we have an amazing panel of experts to learn more about the social acquisition movement, as well as Co-op Convert's research on business conversion to cooperatives as outlets for saving jobs, addressing business succession needs, and creating new cooperatives across Canada. So it's Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada. Great pleasure to welcome Marcelo Vieta, who's Associate Professor at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, OIC, at the University of Toronto, and also on the Co-op Convert research project. We're also joined by Fiona Duguid, who is a researcher for Co-op Convert, and Meg Ronson, who's a project manager at the Legacy Leadership Lab that's part of the Waterloo Institute for Social Innovation and Resilience at the University of Waterloo. So please help me to welcome our panelists today. So thank you for being here with us. Now I'll move on to just provide a bit of context about CMC's role in the IRP. I won't read through the slides here, but just generally speaking, Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada is a knowledge mobilizer as part of the ecosystem mobilization initiatives of the IRP. Our role was to increase awareness on the program, to encourage cooperatives to participate in the funding cycles, and also to share tools on social innovation widely and social finance as they become available. Last summer, we launched a bilingual web portal to facilitate access to resources. You have the web link here. We have 3 different sections here in the resource section to explain the cooperative sector, to look over the context and the history of the IRP and the Social Finance Fund. And then obviously we also had some information on how to access funding. We also included here a list of service providers for the cooperative sector. If you are one, please consider signing up. This platform will be merged onto CMC's website after the program ends. We will be coordinating our efforts with different partners, including Inouï from the McConnell Foundation, who also gather a list of service providers for the sector widely, but also collaborating with the Leadership Legacy Lab to just have one centralized list, hopefully in the future, where cooperatives can also seek, or other enterprises can seek legal experts and other co-op developers. I will briefly mention the Investment Readiness Program. It was launched in 2018 by the Government of Canada. There's still not much detail, as you know, with the crisis that we are living. We're not so sure how that will be deployed, but this pilot project serves to really inform the future of that social finance fund. And it's really important to have the cooperative sector represented with all its needs, and to be also recognized as a model that is key today for the impact that we are seeking in the social and environmental sphere. The funding cycles are closed. The cooperatives did apply. We had a bit over 50 co-ops that received funding. We will be sharing details on the recipients. We have 2 upcoming guides that we are working on towards the end of this program. It's been extended until end of June, but towards the summer, you will be seeing some very interesting guides where we'll synthesize all the learnings. And through our research, we've obviously also, even though we've covered social finance, we are ourselves trying to grasp how it applies for cooperatives and where there's difficulties and challenges. Just wanted to briefly mention, for those who have not heard about the IRP and how social finance is defined, it's a means to an end through repayable investments that generate a positive social, environmental, and/or cultural impact. We have held a webinar in late August last year in collaboration with Inouï on social finance and investment readiness for cooperatives. You can access the recording and the presentation on our web portal. This is the end of the presentation at this end, but I'm really excited myself to hear the experts and panelists today. The cooperative model and the conversion to cooperative model, as we've identified in the IRP, is a key component of all investment readiness discussions. So I hope you will engage with our experts today, and I will give the floor now to Marcelo and Fiona. Thank you very much again, and I look forward to hearing you.
Okay, I'm just going to get the, right, here we go. I'm just going to get my slide, our slides. Okay. Okay, can you all see this? Are you all seeing the slides?
No, we're not.
It popped up and then it disappeared.
Okay.
There we go.
Oh yeah, okay. Okay. Okay, so thank you very much, Nadia, CMC, for inviting us. We're thrilled to be on the same panel with L3 and Meg, and we're really thrilled with the interest that this topic is taking up in Canada. We're going to co-present, myself and Fiona. I'm the project lead on the Co-op Convert project, and Fiona's one of the co-leads. We're really, it's a really collaborative effort. So we've simply titled our presentation, Business Conversions to Cooperatives in Canada, an Overview. And we'll just give an overview of our research. Today we're going to talk, this is a brief high-level outline, briefly about the Co-op Convert project. Canadian BCC, by BCCs we mean Business Conversions to Cooperatives in Canada, our database and findings from our database that we've built, case studies. We'll present 2 case studies, illustrative case studies. We'll present the key findings from our retiring SME owner survey, which should be of interest, and then our next steps in the project. So the Co-op Convert, or the Conversions to Cooperative project, a Co-op Convert project, is a partnership-based project funded by Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. We're in our 3rd year, and we have another year to complete our writings and our research. This is going to be an ongoing project. And we've built lots of networks already in the past 3 years, so we're really interested, lots of partnerships. But in particular, it's a partnership between the core partners are the Centre for Learning, Social Economy and Work at the University of Toronto, which I'm a part of, IRICUS at the University of Sherbrooke, and Claude-André Dulot is the co-lead there. Of course, we work really closely with Cooperatives and Mutuals Canada and Dan Brunette. And so that's the core team, and we have relationships with other associations and federations in the cooperative sector across Canada. For example, the Canadian Worker Cooperative Federation and Ontario Cooperative Association and others as well. So I'm going to just present the brief motivations for this project. What is it that brought us to seek funding and do the research, and then I'll hand it over to Fiona, and she'll go over the objectives of the project. So the reality is that there are well over 1 million SMEs in Canada. As we all know, SMEs drive the Canadian economy. More than 95% of businesses and jobs are in small and medium-sized enterprises. We also know increasingly from research by the CFIB and others that 72% of small business owners will be retiring over the next decade. Almost 60% are over 50. However, only 14% of owners that will be retiring, our research has found, have a formal succession plan. 41% have an informal plan, and 51% have no formal plan. This duplicates and kind of underscores research and findings from other studies across the global north, really, North America and the global north. At stake is a good chunk of the Canadian economy, $1.5 trillion in assets, 850,000 businesses that will be going into some form of transition over the next decade or so. So what do we do? How do we spur this succession planning? And to top it all off, in the middle of our project, COVID hit. And this is another stark reality. As of September 2020, 33% of Canada's businesses were partially closed, and 2% were fully closed due to COVID. The shutdowns continue, and so this is just adding to the pressure. So BCCs could be a very viable solution. There are no solid policies or uniform enabling environments in place in Canada, although we do find, as we'll show today, many business conversions to cooperatives across Canada, but there's no kind of uniform way of doing it, or no kind of uniform enabling environment. There's a multiplicity of enabling environments dependent on regions. And most importantly, and this is most troubling, and what our research is hoping to help change, is that BCCs, although they're a viable option for succession and conversion and for saving local economies, it mostly falls under the radar. Most SME owners, unions, workers, and policymakers don't really know about it. So our questions are why? Why is this the case? What does the co-op sector have to do? And what do SME owners, business leaders, workers, unions, and policymakers need to know about business conversions to remedy the situation? So I'll hand it off to Fiona.
Thanks, Marcelo. So I'm going to tell you in the next couple slides just some of the objectives of this project. As you can see here, we wanted to jump into this space to really understand the enabling environments for business to co-op conversions. As Marcelo said, we have this wonderful space where we get to work both in the academic space as well as the community space. And so a mixed methods approach really works well for this. You can see here on the list of 5, and we're going to talk about some of these today. So we wanted to do an international scan of BCC experiences and enabling environments around the world. We also wanted to dive in and find out what exactly is happening here in Canada in terms of BCCs. We are going to report back on a survey today that we did with small and medium enterprise owners, the SME owners. And then we're helping to round out this understanding to dive in and hear the experiences of people who have had a hand in this enabling environment, as disparate as it is. And then dive in and do some rich and deep case studies of examples of BCCs here in Canada. Go ahead, Marcel. Building on top of that, once we are able to sort of get a grasp on what's happening across Canada and around the world, we wanted to then, from that knowledge building moment, from objective 1, we wanted to then help to work with our community partners, as Marcelo said, some formal, some who have joined en route in this journey, to help build out the capacity of the co-op sector to be able to help advance this as one of the many solutions to some of those big problems that Marcelo talked about in terms of the motivations. So here we can see a nice blend of both very practitioner and community-based kinds of capacity building, resource guides, how-to guides, support in terms of committee formations. And then we also see some other, the other side of this as well, which is that academic side with books as well as articles and reports being written. So sort of a two-pronged objectives for the project overall. Go ahead, Marcel.
Yep. So now I'm going to just overview our BCC database that we've collected over the past 3 years. This is one of our 5 research streams that we had as well. By the way, I just wanted to comment on, we've met most of those 5. We've already somewhat completed or completed some of those 5 already. So we're really happy with the progress. We're right on schedule with the progress of the project. So I'm just going to quickly discuss the BCC database and key findings. So we understand conversions to co-ops across Canada. They're present across most of the country. As you see, though, they're heavily skewed to Quebec for reasons to do with its history and its rich social economy ecosystem. So we have a lot to learn. We're doing, as Fiona said, an international comparative scan of enabling environments for BCCs around the world, but we really don't have to go very far to find one that's really close to home, and that is in our own home, and that's in Quebec. So we're really happy that the IDICUS team is mapping this out, and the rest of Canada really has a lot to learn from how it's done in Quebec. So we won't get into the details here, but it has a lot to do with funding mechanisms and sound policies and partnerships between unions, the labor sector, the social economy, the cooperative sector, and the community development sector in Quebec. However, if BCCs, even in Quebec, we can argue that they're not really well known, right, across Canada. So if they're so promising, then why is this the case? Why aren't they well known? If this is how many we have, there's been about 205 that we've tracked. Most of them still open. Some of them have demutualized. Some of them have closed, but most of them stay open. We also know, but it's going to be another project, that there is a vast amount of housing cooperatives that have converted from privately owned buildings to co-ops, and that's has a rich history in Canada. But we weren't able to complete that database for various reasons. So we're going to continue that work later. But really, non-housing co-ops, we understand there to be about 173 that are currently active and about 200 that have been around. Most firms are converting from being private firms, although as Meg is going to describe, conversions can happen in a wide variety of organization types. They can come from the public sector converting to co-ops or social enterprises, or they can come from even nonprofits converting to co-ops. We have a couple of cases of those in Canada, right? So there's different ways, but on the whole, how it happens in Canada and conversions, business conversions to cooperatives are from private firms, privately owned firms, shareholder firms, to democratic-based co-ops. Most of them tend to be consumer co-ops, some worker co-ops, worker shareholder co-ops, which is a unique Quebec model where the employees take on partial ownership of the firm with traditional owners. Multi-stakeholder solidaire cooperatives, again, most unique to Quebec as far as the identity of that model, and then producer co-ops as well. And finally, we find them across the economy, across sectors. We're going to talk about some cases. Fiona in a minute is going to talk about two really promising cases. Other cases that we should underscore that we're following as well. Part of our deliverables is going to be a rich set of representative and illustrative cases of conversions in different sectors across different regions. Aaron Theatre in Ontario, Nelco Mechanical, which was a conversion of an industrial firm in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s. Careforce Home Healthcare. Some of these have demutualized and gone back to being private firms. We can talk about why this might happen. The ambulance sector and the funeral sector in Quebec, and grocery stores as well. Interesting, and this has been confirmed also by our SME survey. So I'm going to talk in a minute about small and medium-sized enterprises that are most amenable to conversion in Canada. And they tend to follow those that have already converted, in the sense that conversions in Canada to co-ops tend to be most amenable in the information and services sector, education, health, and arts and recreation. So about 46%, almost 50% are in this services kind of anchor organization, anchor business and communities type of organizations. That's what we find from doing an analysis of our database. And like I said, we're highlighting some cases, and I'm going to pass it on to Fiona, who'll be talking about two very promising recent cases of conversions to co-ops.
Thanks, Marcelo, for that view from across Canada. I'm going to now do a couple of deeper dives for you of two examples of conversions to co-ops. Now, some of you might know the small town in Ontario called Kincardine. Here we have a group of super strong middle-aged women. Ask a group of middle-aged women to get something done, and they do. The Kincardine Ladies Fitness Co-op is a really amazing example of from multinational franchisee to not-for-profit co-op. In this case, it was a Curves. This is a type of fitness program and franchise business that was in Kincardine. and was really not meeting all the members' needs. And also, the franchise itself was being a little greedy about where the profit should go, and the demands of what should be done in terms of the running of the business. So needless to say, the franchisee was looking to move on, and so the group of members of that fitness co-op, in fact, bought and are now running the Kincardine Ladies Fitness Co-op as a nonprofit co-op. It is now meeting all of their needs because there's a direct connection between their fitness needs and, in fact, what they themselves are offering to each other. It's a perfect example of a deep connection with what do members want and how can we provide it, right? They're able to be super duper lean because there's no franchise costs, there's no employees, and no one is needing to take any profit out of this because they are all getting the benefits of having exactly the kind of fitness workouts that they want. We also see, in terms of that community economic development kind of moment, we can see no dollars leaking out of the community at all in terms of that multinational franchise, because in fact they're running it for themselves and by themselves, and welcoming of anybody who wants to become a new member. Now they had a super supportive previous owner who was really helpful in helping them to transition into the co-op. But at the same time, also interestingly, none of them knew anything about the co-op model before they entered into this project. This is, in one case, interesting that how successful they've been, but not super unusual as we have found certainly in our research, and I'm sure many of you have also encountered in the work that you do as well. That knowledge level of what is a co-op and how you or we could be involved in the making of it. Kincardine Ladies Fitness Co-op is a great example. Thanks, Marcelo. If you want to move it to the next one. I'm going to turn us out to the east coast here, sorry, to Halifax, and talk a little bit about Glitter Bean Cafe. Here we have a different kind of conversion to a co-op, and in this case, it was really driven by some key community characteristics. First of all, we have a group of skilled baristas and cafe workers who want to be able to keep their jobs in that space. We have a highly socially cohesive group who share a very high level of LGBTQ2+ identities, and want to be able to continue to have a safe place where they can work, and also our people of these identities can also come and be at. And especially so because this in Halifax is one of the only no alcohol served space, safe space identified. And then finally, in terms of community characteristics, they had already gone through a unionization process, and so had the strength of their union behind them as well. What we also see in this movement towards the conversion, we see really supportive roles in terms of another coffee roaster in the province who really stepped up and supported and helped in that moment. We also see, as I said, the union was really helpful, both financially and in terms of human resources. And then also we were able to hire a co-op developer in this case to be able to step in and help them to develop bylaws and move through that process in a streamlined and efficient and building on those community strengths as well. What we see here is a ton of sweat equity put into this cafe. And as a result, there was no government financial support needed in terms of having to buy out or develop into and convert into a co-op needed here. In both of these cases, I want to just mention, and I know Meg's going to jump into this a little bit more, in both cases, a cafe and a fitness co-op in a time of time of COVID. These are both really tricky businesses to be running. And yet to this day, they both continue to survive, if not thrive. I'm going to turn it over to Marcelo to take us to the next space around this SME owners survey. Thanks, Marcelo.
Yeah, no, thanks, Fiona. So our report on the survey that's, we've been working on this for about 1.5 years now, is done and it's almost ready to go. We're just waiting for our dissemination strategy and social media strategy, but it's ready to go. And you can see here on the right-hand side of the screen, that is the report. There is a synopsis of it also on our website right now, but this isn't official yet, but it will be very, very soon. So we conducted a survey of SME business owners nearing retirement to see what their retirement plans were and to see what their knowledge and amenability, so to speak, or disposition towards conversion to cooperative model would be. We conducted the survey last year, January to February 2020. It was a representative business panel of about 319, actually not about, it was 319 near retirement SME owners, weighted across provinces, 45 plus, across genders, mostly male, just follows the general demographic of business owners in Canada. And it represents a broad cross-section of business sizes of SMEs. Most SMEs tend to be small businesses, 50, less than 50 or around 50, between 50 and less. And it's the survey we engaged Modus Research, who has the business panel. And so it was a collaboration with them as well. So we found that the succession intentions and the situation of retirement age SME owners in Canada parallels some of the latest findings, 2018 findings from CFIB, although we kind of updated some of those numbers. Only 14% of SME owners have a succession plan. More than 50% want to keep on working. This is really interesting. More than 50% of retirement age owners do not want to retire. This is an opportunity for conversion to a cooperative, should they know more about co-ops. For those that do want to retire, almost 50% are going to do so in the next 5 years, but only 48% of them are at least somewhat familiar with what to do. And like I said, 14% have a succession plan. So there's lots of challenges that they face, SME owners face, including time to put a plan together, the complexity of doing it, finding professionals that know about succession, finding buyers, obviously, and then interpersonal. This is something interesting that we found that underscores some of the research that's been done around SME succession more broadly, and that's interpersonal issues with family and with workers even. So some of the things that we found as well. So again, the succession intentions. Few SME owners we found in Canada are familiar with co-ops, so never mind business conversions to co-ops. So the general understanding of cooperatives is very, very low. There's a lot of misunderstandings and misperceptions of cooperatives. They're perceived to be inefficient businesses and uncompetitive in their own sector by a vast majority of those that we interviewed. Those of us that have been studying cooperatives for decades know that this is not true. Cooperatives are very competitive, very efficient businesses, and very viable in most sectors, if not all the business sectors, right? So I just want to underscore this, and we'll return to this at the very end. However, almost 3/4 of SME owners believe that granting equity ownership to employees improves their loyalty. So one of the things that we're suggesting in this report and in this research is that this might serve as a proxy. This might serve as a proxy suggesting that there might be an innate amenability or likelihood for SME owners to want to convert to co-op should they know more about cooperatives. If we were to educate business owners more about co-ops, maybe, and if we could connect this desire of more equitable spaces, right, providing more equity for their employees, which cooperatives do, they offer more equitable businesses, then this might be what we're calling a proxy for employee ownership and conversions in Canada. Again, we found a low propensity currently to convert to co-op. Only 17% said they are somewhat or very likely to convert to co-op. However, this is a kind of a fair number. So we already know that 17% of SMEs in Canada, that's a market. That's a sector, or that's a subsector of SME owners that we could appeal to, we in the cooperative sector could appeal to promote the BCC model more. So there already exists, it's small, but there already exists SME owners that have a propensity, that could have a propensity to convert to cooperative. So what does this 17% look like? We were able to kind of come up with a profile of the 17% of currently existing SMEs that could be amenable to converting to a cooperative currently. So this is like the low-hanging fruit for the co-op sector. If we want to promote the model, this is where we start. And we then track these, build cases, and then spread the word more broadly. And this is kind of the research that we'd like to continue in Co-op Convert and L3 and others. This is a type of thing that we could deploy our skills to and help the co-op sector. So what's the profile of these businesses? So they tend to have SME owners that don't want to retire. Okay, so this is that group that the 50% that doesn't want to retire at all. They want to keep on working for various reasons. So it tends to be businesses that have those types of owners. It tends to be SMEs that are already considered selling to employees. They discussed it. They kind of know about it. This is kind of like, an obvious thing, but they kind of know about it already. So they're kind of amenable to it. They might have forgotten about it, but they're smaller firms, less than 50 employees. And of those, the majority are less than 10 employees. So this suggests, and it underscores previous research that I've conducted and that's out there, that in firms that people really know each other and have strong social networks, those tend to be the ones that will go ahead and do this kind of task of conversion. Older firms, they've been around for a while, so they have a legacy, they have a lot to lose, the community and the business should they close. So there's a deeper legacy. It tends not to be new firms, but older firms. SMEs in the services sector, again, this taps into that 46% and underscores that we found in our database that tend to be in the services sector and education sector already. And also in the construction sector as well. We found there was a fair number in the construction sector. And SMEs that emerge from founders. So the founders are still present rather than a merger or an acquisition or even a family inheritance. So further proxies for conversion, looking at the broader sample, is most SME owners in Canada, like a vast majority of them, are also amenable to retaining know-how, markets, and value in succession, securing business continuity, securing jobs and employees. Again, these are proxies that could serve to, if we could communicate more about the values of co-ops and how viable they are as businesses and how good they are around these values, then this is the link. Perhaps this could be the link to convince more business owners to consider the succession model. So the lesson for the Canadian cooperative sector, this is the punchline of our of our research here, is that co-op sector leaders in Canada have much more educating and promoting of the BCC model to do. Promoting and educating geared towards SME owners, economic leaders, professionals, unions, and policymakers. So the strategy for this kind of promotion and education we suggest would be, don't focus on the community part of it yet, although that's really important. That's not going to attract SME owners that don't know much about BCCs and co-ops. What's going to attract them is some of these proxies that we've mentioned, the strengths of co-ops as businesses, right? Then you bring in the community value piece. And that's the recommendation coming out of our project for promoting this model more. And then I'm going to pass it on to Fiona to close up our presentation. So what are the next steps?
Thanks, Marcelo. Clearly there's a lot of work to do that we're going to try to work on a few of these things. We know our partners are working hard to continue to build out that awareness as well as build out that capacity. And hopefully our work will be able to help them with that. We're going to do some more case studies to dive a little deeper. In total, we're going to do over 15 of them. I think at this point we've got 8 done, and those will be coming out shortly. We are going to actually follow right from the very beginning all the way to the end, hopefully, a case that's happening out on the West Coast. We're building out with our partners at OCA, the Ontario Cooperative Association, a diagnostic tool used for those SME owners. So hopefully we'll be able to launch that. Then building out a report based on the landscape work that Marcelo presented. And then bringing together all those sort of multi methods, approaches that we spoke about earlier on at the beginning, in order to start to bring together that best practices report, which will have an international comparative piece as well. We're hopefully going to be able to publish a book that really brings Canada into a spotlight here in terms of the BCCs that have happened. And what is the Canadian sort of way or version of this? And then, of course, we're looking forward to connecting more and more with all of you, and as well as others in conferences and networking and support to help build out the enabling environment based on the research that we've been able to find. So, and this is a perfect segue moment for us to say thank you so much for our community partner in Co-ops and Mutuals Canada, and also another partner who we've been working very closely with, which is the L3. And so this is Meg, who I think we're going to turn to next. Thank you, everybody. And we are wide open to further conversation.
Thanks so much, Fiona. Nadia, do you have any transitional statements before I jump in? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, my connection froze here. I just wanted to just quickly thank Marcelo and Fiona for those amazing lessons learned. Also, it helps also for us to know how we can move on, take this forward. But I'll just let Meg present, and then we'll do the question and answer at the end. Thank you.
Wonderful. Let's get going. I'm just going to share my screen and get my slides up. Everyone, Marcelo and Fiona, give me a thumbs up if you see my screen. Perfect. So thanks so much, Marcelo and Fiona, for kind of going first and setting the stage for our attendees today to talk specifically about co-op conversions and all the important work you do there. And now it's my turn to kind of scale back a little bit and talk a little bit more broadly about where the cooperative conversion concept and solution fits within a broader system that's evolving in Canada. It started a little while ago and has kind of really snowballed into something quite incredible. And I'm going to be a little bit of a cheerleader today for some elements of the cooperative sector that I believe are the way forward for moving the sector and moving the movement forward. But I anticipate some people disagree with me, which means we're going to probably have some lively discussion. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. So it's a little bit of a little bit of an interactive session today. So let's get going. So my name is Meg Ronson. I'm with the Legacy Leadership Lab from the Waterloo Institute for Social Innovation and Resilience at the University of Waterloo. And we are funded just like CMC was through the partnership with the Government of Canada's Investment Readiness Program. And so today's topics, broadly speaking, will be talking very quickly about the business succession landscape as impacted by COVID-19. I'm a numbers nerd and I love diving into Statistics Canada's business counts whenever I can. So this was an opportunity for me to do that. And then we'll move on to just talking about what social acquisitions are, the concept, the term, and we'll then examine the Legacy Leadership Lab and the emerging social acquisition system and what it means for cooperatives. And then finally, I'll very briefly touch on resources and events. So as I said, I do want this to be a bit more interactive than just me talking. So when you see the little red speech bubble, it means that it's time to jump into the chat and chat away. That includes you, Marcelo, and Fiona, and Nadia, and even our interpreter, if they're able. Actually, that's not fair. You can only do one thing at once. Jump in the chat and join the conversation. And then if you see the little blue icon, it means it's time for a poll, and I'll be working with CMC to launch various polls. So let's first talk about COVID-19 and business succession to add a little more context, a little deeper context into some of the numbers that Fiona and Marcelo shared with us. So as many probably know, there is obviously this growing public awareness of that demographic problem of the aging baby boomers and its impact on the small business sector. Back in 2018, myself and Sean Goby from the University of Waterloo estimated that around 700,000 small businesses were at risk of closure because of the lack of succession. And we also found out that most owners are not ready for succession, and neither is anyone else. And when I say anyone else, I mean their advisors, their financiers, the government, the communities that depend on them for their services and products. So it's a big issue. And then of course the pandemic has accelerated closures or drastically disrupted or delayed viable successions. I don't have figures on this. It is anecdotal, but I do have some numbers that hint at this. So what we see here in this graphic is I like doing just very quick back of the napkin kind of big picture data analyses when I do things like this. So what I've done here is I've just taken the numbers for continuing businesses, closing businesses, and opening businesses. So that big black spike at the bottom is that huge spike of closing businesses that happened right around April and May when the pandemic really hit the small business sector hard. So this is the number of small businesses that closed. And as you can see, it spikes and there continues to be a lot more closures than openings for that big triangular time in right around March, April, and May. And then it dips down and you see some openings happening again that are more than the closures going on into November. And then the data we don't have for winter, but I imagine we're going to see that uptick again, that triangle again in the winter of in early months of 2021. Now, that blue line is what we're looking at here, and this is across Canada. You see a huge dive, and that's a drop of between November, and this is adjusted for seasonality too, so that's important to consider as well. This isn't just seasonal dips and jumps because it's adjusted. You can see a drop of over 130,000 businesses that did not continue. Starting around March and then going down into July, and then the recovery, but it's not quite as high as it was before. And as I said before, I expect there's going to be another drop in the winter months. When it comes to provincially, not all provinces were affected equally. Ontario got hit really hard with about 20% in basically that gap that I showed between November and June and what that impact was. 20% of businesses did not, there was a continuity gap of 20% in Ontario. And that's more, and even when you have a recovery where businesses are opening up again, that doesn't mean that, oh, it's going back to normal. Opening businesses to replace closing businesses is the reason why Marcelo, Fiona, and I care about this issue so much and why we want cooperative conversions to be a solution, because we acknowledge that when essential businesses, even non-essential businesses close, replacing them with startups is not the equivalent, far from it. You're losing so much when you lose a small business. And so I just want to stress that, even when the recovery, even when we look back at the numbers and say, oh, look, all of these businesses closed, but then we had, almost the equivalent open again. There's no way of knowing whether those are viable businesses or not, the way that the closing businesses might have been. Oh, what did I just do here? And then, and then the recovery rate. So I want to flag also, and again, I want to stress this isn't necessarily a true recovery rate. This is just back of the napkin kind of numbers. Ontario hasn't bounced back in terms of continuing businesses the way that some of the other provinces have. So Manitoba, if I flip back, was the least affected in terms of its impact on continuing businesses when those numbers went down, and it's also now returned to its normal numbers much faster than Ontario. But again, this is just very high level statistical analyses. Don't take this to BDC and say, look, I've solved the economy. All right, so introduction to social acquisitions. Now that we've had a chance to kind of think about what COVID has done to business continuity and what that might mean for succession, let's talk about this solution that the Legacy Leadership Lab is exploring. And so now it's time for a little chat. And basically, what I'm trying to capture today and talk about today is the cooperative experience within this broader movement of what I will call social acquisition, and I'll explain what it is in a second. But co-ops do have a long history in Canada and across the world. Co-ops, in my opinion, thrive on finding common ground, both the members and amongst one another. And I do find that there is an inherent Canadianness to cooperativism and cooperativeness. And I mean that especially when we think about the Québécois cultural movement of la solidarité, when we see ag co-ops in the prairies, it feels like cooperatives belong in Canada. And I welcome people to share their thoughts about these thoughts in the chat, whether or not you agree with some of these statements, whether something reminded you of something. I just want to create space for a chat. So feel free to put your thoughts in the chat on those concepts. And then I'm also going to invite, I think it's Grace who's running the Zoom portal to launch the first poll. So I can't see if the poll is, there we go. All right. So that's great. Everyone here today, and I think I know why, because I know most of the people in the room. Everyone here today identifies themselves as being part of the co-op movement. So I don't need to really go into advocating for explaining what the co-op movement is or why it's important. So I'll just kind of move forward. And again, this is poll number 2. How familiar are you with the terms? And I guess this question applies to folks before you joined this call with Fiona and Marcelo. How familiar were you with these terms? Because obviously, Nadia explained what social finance is, and we kind of understand social enterprise as well. Oops, sorry. All right. All right. So we've got some very littles and some varies. So that's interesting. Excellent. Thanks everyone for participating. So we're going to talk about some of these things. So when we talk about a social acquisition, for those who are unfamiliar with the concept, we start with kind of 2 different perspectives. It starts with an existing business that's looking for a change. So sometimes that looks like a business looking for succession options because of an owner retirement or exit. And sometimes it looks like a business that is failing or needs to be restructured because of some kind of disruption. That could be, the COVID-19 pandemic, or it could be a death or a major illness. In either case, something needs to change, and so the owner, owner decides it's time to exit, and there needs to be some changes. The other way that a co-op in a social acquisition can happen is when a community is hoping to acquire and control assets, and it could be happening simultaneously, or one or the other could be driving it. So in the case for communities that suddenly decide, you know what, we need to socially acquire or cooperatively acquire this asset. It can look like nonprofits seeking to further their mission while generating sustainable revenue, and we'll talk more about why that suddenly has become a hot topic in the sector. And it also happens when community groups or nonprofits form to take over vital or essential assets or services. So when you have a bunch of folks who think alike or who care about similar things and discover that they share a mutual interest or need to control or have a say in the direction of a particular asset or or business or something similar like that, a social acquisition is spurred by that kind of community, whether it's a grassroots-led initiative or sometimes it can be institutionally led by nonprofits or other community leaders, politicians even sometimes. And this is where don't lose yourself in this graphic. I want to just highlight that I wanted to show you how the seller and the buyer are both kind of intricately involved in social acquisitions. So it can happen from both sides. It can happen together. And once the transition happens, the new enterprise that comes out of this social acquisition needs to be sustained and nurtured. And the owner can stay or the owner can exit, regardless of what's happened. And there's all kinds of things that need to happen. So this is the process map that Legacy Leadership Lab has created to try to articulate what are kind of the high level events that happen for both the buyer and seller, and then that sustained business. So I'm going to zoom out to just pause and make sure that everybody is on the same page when it comes to what I'm talking about, which is what is a social acquisition. And a social acquisition occurs when there's that change in ownership and also a change in mission. So and just to clarify, cooperative conversions, as L3 understands them, are a type of social acquisition. So social acquisition is kind of this broad banner. Cooperatives are one kind, and I'll get into what the different kinds are as well. But I wanted to make that clear. And so when a conventional enterprise that's not been a co-op and not been a nonprofit, not had a social mission kind of stated outright in their business model, that's when the social acquisition kind of comes into play, because the owner the ownership is looking to change, whether it's full or partial, and then there's this mission that starts to kind of creep in and become part of the business. And the important thing also when you talk about a social acquisition is the importance of having that existing revenue generating capacity be improved or at least sustained when you undergo a social acquisition. You can't undergo a social acquisition and throw out the revenue part of it, because then it's not a socially driven enterprise anymore. It's a liability for the owner, the new owners. So the end result at the end of the day is an organization or company that is mission driven and is selling goods or services to both earn a revenue but also achieve positive social, cultural, or environmental results. And so that, long-standing cooperators read that and say absolutely most, if not all, co-ops absolutely have those two, not competitive, but aligned and working side by side purposes of having a mission and having revenue generation. Most co-ops, that mission, all co-ops, the mission being serving the needs of the members, and then hopefully most co-ops having that 7 principles, social embeddedness, and generating more than just member benefits, but generating all kinds of external community benefits as well. So, and so some people might then come to me and say, well, why, Meg, are we talking about social acquisitions, not just co-op conversions? What is this term? Where did this come from? Because it is a new term. The Legacy Leadership Lab coined it just a year ago. And so the reason we started talking about social acquisitions and what they are is because there are a few different reasons why social acquisitions need their moment in the sun, or longer than a moment in the sun. So first of all, roughly 9 million Canadians have applied to CERB due to wage losses, according to the CRA. So that's a huge amount of unemployment that continues to impact all of Canada, and certainly is impacting those who need income the most. People who are executives and make lots of money don't really get fired; they get bonuses. Or, I don't want to digress. The government has committed $755 million in investment to investable social purpose organizations. So that's not just co-ops, that's all social enterprises. And I'll get into why that matters in a moment. But yeah, the government, if they make due on their commitment, will be significantly investing in social enterprises and co-ops, and expect a 2-to-1 private sector matching. So they expect to inject some money, and then they want the private sector and the other social and not so social financiers to also invest in these revenue generating enterprises that also have social ends. Social acquisitions obviously are a tool to preserve important businesses in small and rural communities. And the reason I mention that in particular is because when it comes to business turnover, major city centers don't need to worry too much. They're already kind of deeply embedded in global economies that kind of tick, march to their own drum, versus smaller and more rural communities, of which there are, as we know, a large majority in Canada, rely heavily on small, locally owned businesses in order to sustain their activities and their tax revenue and their livelihoods and employment. So social acquisitions are really a great solution for these kinds of communities that can't and don't want to call up Walmart and say, hey, can you build a Walmart in my town? And so finally, social acquisitions is getting the entire business community of Canada and of the world to get the whole business community moving towards addressing social and environmental challenges. Corporate responsibility does that a little bit. There is over time, I see Fiona going, does it though? And there are those who debate it, justly so, as to its effectiveness. But we are seeing a societal shift across the world that demands more of business communities and corporations to serve not only their own needs, but the greater needs of the planet and of the communities that they sell to and serve, the employees that they pay. And so social acquisitions is actually a more direct, in my opinion, a more direct and focused effort to bring those social and environmental ends right into the revenue generating practices of businesses. Okay, what does it look like? When I talk about social acquisition, what does it mean? What does it look like when it happens? Co-op conversions, I don't need to go into detail. We already know a lot about that thanks to Fiona and Marcelo. They have a massive amount of case studies that you can consult them on. One of them is Arise Architects. It was a conventional enterprise, a conventional architectural firm that was recently converted into a cooperative thanks to the help of many practitioners, including Mr. Peter Cameron, who is here on the call, I believe. And there was a mention actually of ESOP, so employee stock ownership plans. L3 considers this as a bit of a gateway into broader social enterprise, social purpose capacity, because it's a step toward employee governance and ownership. It is actually a means of introducing employee ownership, but it doesn't necessarily have that governance piece that is kind of that crucial engagement and empowerment of employees. But Beau's Brewery is considered a social acquisition because at the same time that they implemented this employee share ownership plan, they also pursued a B Corp designation. And I'll talk about what that is in a second. Municipal acquisitions are a really, really great tool for those cases where you have a business or community asset that is essential to the core of a municipality's flavor of its tax revenue, of its economy. So Mont Adstock in Quebec was a multi-stakeholder cooperative buyout, but we call it also, in addition to that, we also call it a municipal buyout because the municipality played a large role in the actual acquisition. They financed part of the acquisition, and they continue to be at the table, and they are an active part of the business now that it is a multi-stakeholder cooperative. And it was a case where the business was failing. It was deep in debt, and the community was terrified of losing this asset because it employed so many of its citizens, and it also generated a lot of tourist revenue for the local economy. It was essential to the community, and that's when you have things like multi-stakeholder buyouts and municipal buyouts happening. Other municipal acquisitions that I've heard of are airports, and I've heard of there was a private company that owned the sewage services in, I think, somewhere in Alberta, and that was purchased by a municipality when the owner was looking to sell it, and it became a way for the municipality to actually save some money because they were able to generate small amounts of revenue from that purchase. But this is anecdotal, and I wish I could give you links for some of these, but some of these are just through the grapevine that I've heard about them. Charitable acquisitions are a very emerging and very exciting solution. Again, they can become multi-stakeholder acquisitions where charities become part owners. but sometimes you can have charities buy out businesses outright. And it happens when a charity either, in the best of cases, the charity is purchasing a business that will actually continue to advance its own charitable social purpose. And the best example I found of this is a charity that it was an association that advocated for employment of people with visual impairments, and they purchased a call center and owned the call center and use it as a way to employ people with visual impairments. And they have set up the entire call center and adapted it to be very, very accessible workplace for people with visual impairments. And so they advance their social mission, and they also generate sustainable revenue, and it's just a win-win for everybody. Finally, designation acquisitions are some of the more relevant ones to folks in the cooperative community who are here as cooperatives. And I did kind of structure this presentation to speak directly to cooperators and to cooperatives. And so this designations are cool because cooperatives absolutely can and do pursue designations to help them structure their social purpose as cooperatives, because as we know, cooperatives aren't necessarily governed by a body that oversees whether or not they're being socially responsible in their practices. And so cooperatives that want that extra edge and that extra support in making sure that they are doing what they say they want to do, designations can be a great way of doing that. So Living Wage Canada has examples in BC and of Ontario where there are solutions and agencies that can actually help businesses figure out what the living wage is in their area, and then help them move towards paying their employees at least that. And there's an example actually of Together We're Bitter is a cooperative in Kitchener, Ontario that calls itself a living wage employer. They're a worker co-op, and I think they also have community investors. But this is just an example of the Ontario network. As you can see, there's hundreds of living wage employers. These aren't co-ops; these are necessarily co-ops. But it goes to show you that it's a growing movement of social good that is, arguably a pretty low bar for what employees should be paid. You would think it would be obvious that if you're going to employ somebody, you want to pay them enough that they can feed themselves and live. B corporations are a very common thing as well. I just mentioned B Corps and Beau's Brewery undergoing a B Corporation designation. So you work with B Corp to make sure that you score a certain score on their kind of scoreboard. And because it's an international body, it is kind of the last word on social impact when you are seeking, especially like a global audience for your products and services. This is a case example that I like to shout out because it was recent and it was very exciting, and it's a social acquisition that was really led by a lot of different players that sometimes aren't part of the social economy necessarily. So Coons Country Candy is a candy store out on the West Coast, the Sunshine Coast, I believe, and a Community Futures office. For those who aren't familiar, Community Futures are a nationally governed funding body that finances businesses in rural communities in Canada, all across Canada. You can find one in every single small and rural area in Canada. And so the office in Community Futures Alberni Clayoquot actually purchased a candy store that was looking for an owner, and they are slowly but surely transitioning it into a social purpose enterprise that both generates revenue for them so that they continue to invest in more small businesses in the community, but they're also prioritizing the training and employment of people with disabilities. So excellent example of not a very complicated social acquisition. It's not a cooperative acquisition, but it's an example of how, that could easily have been a cooperative acquisition. It could have easily been a multi-stakeholder buyout of some kind. I'm getting all flipped around. this designation acquisition was supposed to be upwards. Anyway, I guess I'm going back to designation acquisitions. LEED certification is a designation you can get for your buildings, homes, or communities. So that's another way of pursuing social good when you own property. Okay, and then this, a lot of people ask, how do we know when it's a good time to pursue a social acquisition? And this is kind of the list of things that we published in our paper in 2018 when we were talking about conversions to cooperatives in Ontario. But we borrow this as a great example of just social acquisitions these conditions also being great for social acquisitions. And so what you see here is high levels of that community value. That certainly was the case in the Coombs Country Candy, where it was a historic kind of old-fashioned candy store. Lots of folks cared about it. High levels of social capital, so intersocial capital, where you have clearly, the owner was integral to the economy that it was in because it was a purchase by an economic development type organization. Firms that are labor intensive but low in financial capital, that's thanks to Marcelo's research. That is directly from recommendations as to what makes for a good co-op conversion. And again, borrowed directly from co-op conversion theory, firms and industries with a high degree of employee collaboration are great for co-ops and social acquisitions. And then finally, these are some other kind of conditions. One being, knowledge and adoption of the cooperative identity, as co-ops tend to cluster, right? When one co-op transitions and is successful, more follow when they hear about the successes. And then I do like to joke that a depressed economy is not a good condition per se, but it's certainly when things are hard, cooperatives flourish because cooperatives solve problems that the regular market does not know how to. And so some folks might be asking, so what makes an acquisition social purpose? What differentiates these acquisitions that you're talking about from just normal, straight up acquisitions where businesses are bought and sold just like houses are? And of course, it's that social element that makes an acquisition social. So some of the things that make an acquisition social, and there are many kinds because as we know, certainly using the United Nations Social Development Goals is a great way to determine what exactly social means, because the United Nations has done extensive work on determining what the world needs in order to flourish, what people need in order to flourish. But some great examples that we see time and time again are worker ownership being a social good because it puts the means of production and the means of making a living into the hands of those who are doing the work. And that's actually a rare thing these days. A lot of the means of production and means of making a living are not in people's hands, and they don't have control over their own livelihoods, which is too bad, because you would think it would be just part of our society. Civic engagement involves, things like charitable donations and supporting community work. Diversity and inclusion, when businesses and enterprises prioritize hiring and serving the needs of folks who are underhired and underserved, that is a clear social good. Environmental goods and reconciliation and self-determination with Indigenous folks across the nation and across the world are also social goods as well. And those can be tracked in all kinds of ways, but this is not a presentation about social impact measurement. That would be a whole class or paper. How much time do I have here? Am I running out?
Yeah, we have another minute, Meg.
Oh boy.
Just to perhaps conclude
Oh
if
man,
you can, and
I
then we
really
can still
overloaded
continue
myself.
engagement in the question and answer. There's lots to cover.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So Legacy Leadership Lab, very briefly, we work on social acquisitions as a solution, and we bring together stakeholders to build solutions that will see more social acquisitions happen. And our goal is to, provide a research-supported structure for that work, We've developed a massive network of folks who are working on social acquisitions and want to see them thrive. And we leverage our social innovation lab process to change the system we work in. We have created the community has created all kinds of prototypes that folks can access by pursuing, just joining the network and working with us. And I'll skip that. And yeah, I guess I'll do a whole other talk for Nadia on takeaways for cooperatives, because there's a lot of good stuff in there. I feel so embarrassed. I put so many things in my slides. All right, I will leave it at that though.
Thank you, Meg. I think even those takeaways, we will be including them in our guides, and again, we'll be publishing those. But thank you to all of you for these inspiring case studies, for these very interesting insights. We'll have a couple of questions that we have to cover, so I'll address them here. So we have another 15 minutes, so the participants are free to also add more questions as they come. In the resolved question and answer, there was a question on, sorry, I'm getting lost. Okay, so this one was addressed to Fiona. Do you happen to know the names of the businesses that underwent these conversions in the farming and camping sectors?
Thanks, Sonia. I can get those names for you. This is a specific question about conversions that happened in New Brunswick. And so we know in farming, there's a family farm that converted, and we also know that there's a camping. But I will also say that New Brunswick has been a tricky province for us to really fully understand and get all of the information about. So we would be happy to also hear from anyone else. I'll also say that unearthing BCCs that have happened in order to create this database has been such a joyful job, but also just a real task because in some cases they are very mature and no one even remembers that they were once not a co-op. Other times, it's just not very well known, and so people aren't talking about it either in their communities that this is happening. So it actually has been really tricky, especially so for New Brunswick, but also just in general across Canada, sort of digging around and finding these. So by no means is that map that Marcelo put up there. This is an evergreen project, and that map will be evolving. That's for sure.
So
if I could just
sorry,
also
Marcelo.
quickly in the broad agricultural rural sector, some real really important cases are Battle River Railway, which is an NGC cooperative of local farmers in Canmore, Alberta, who bought out a short line and converted it to co-op. Really interesting. Westlock grain elevator, also in Alberta, is another important case. A multi-stakeholder co-op that's pretty complicated, really complex in Quebec. It's in the rural sector as Boisaco as well. It's part of our database. And then in the forestry sector in BC, Herrick Proctor Community Forest is a conversion to a co-op. Really interesting. It's one of our cases as well. And then there's other potentials from across Canada too.
I'll take this other question. Meg has reacted, but I'll be curious to know your perspective. Do you think owners would be more inclined to opt for equity ownership by employees, yet not turn to democratic co-op governance? Is that a challenge to BCCs, even if owners are considering employee ownership?
Who's this question for?
Well, if you wanted to add maybe some more aspects, Meg has already answered in written form, but in case you wanted to add.
Yeah, I
Anything?
can read my answer for Marcelo in case you can't see it. So I, in answer to it, I said, I personally do believe ESOPs are more accessible seeming to conventional owners. And I do like to advocate for ESOPs as a gateway into a more fully fleshed out employee buyout down the line. But I admit I can't think of any cases of this happening. Maybe Co-op Convert does have some captured.
Yeah, so that's true, and we don't have them in Canada, but there are cases in the U.S. of ESOPs. Sorry, someone's mowing the lawn next to me. If you're just in case you're hearing something, but
That's a good sign.
Yeah, it's a good.
Oh wait, no, where are you, Marcelo?
I am not in Canada.
You're not in
right
Canada.
now.
That's what I thought. Never mind. It's not a good sign.
Okay, I have been here for a while, by the way. Okay. I might pause if you don't hear me. Anyway, and answer this later. But in the U.S., we have ESOPs that are also co-ops as well. I don't know of any in Canada. So they're ESOPs and 100% employee governed as well. But yeah, you're totally right, Meg. Most ESOPs tend to be about employee ownership and partial ownership, but the governance part, the decision-making part is missing. So it's not a complete, we don't call it a complete conversion. It's a partial conversion. A complete conversion would be where the community or the members have ownership stakes, majority ownership stakes, and decision-making rights as well. So ESOPs don't tend to be, it could be a gateway. Also in our, but we haven't found this in Canada. There have been no ESOPs that have, all of a sudden they're enlightened to convert to co-ops. But they could be if they were promoted that way, or if they were kind of designed or strategically that way.
Yeah, like if there were tax implications, for example, that allowed for an easy conversion of shares into, I mean,
I personally think that the ESOP succession model conversion is on one track, business conversions to co-ops on another track, other social acquisitions. The idea is to bring them together somehow.
Absolutely.
and to, like, there are cases where it could be a charity, cooperative, ESOP, conversion, right? And I think that these experiences that we're unpacking can kind of somehow be brought together over the next years. Yeah, project that's to be developed.
Thank you, Marcelo. Another question here, and I think it will be helpful to take away any thoughts on how to encourage more people to become co-op developers and address the lack of capacity issues to support BCCs, and how do we find resources to pay for co-op development in BCCs and then incentivize more co-op developers to help build capacity?
Yeah, let me just quickly jump in here to say that the L3 project has been an amazing experiment in convening key players, key stakeholders, key professional stakeholders that could potentially develop future co-op developers. So here's the paradox in the conversions to co-ops universe in Canada. Most of them are led by co-op developers. So where the co-op developer is and where the co-op, so location and where they've done a conversion already, that's where you'll see a conversion happen, right? Because it's in the head. So how it happens is in the head of co-op developers.
Yeah.
However, there aren't many co-op developers in Canada that have done conversions. We've interviewed all of them, I think, as part of our key informant interviews. So I think one of the challenges that the co-op movement has is succession into new co-op developers, developing new co-op developers, and expanding out co-op development to just not be individuals, but to take on related professionals, business valuators, accountants, lawyers that are that know about co-ops and know what the process of conversion is. I think this is where we are right now. I don't know, Meg and Fiona.
Absolutely, I agree, Marcelo, and those on the call probably know already that Russ Christensen, who's a leader in business succession through cooperatives, and myself are developing not only a suite of workshops in partnership with the Economic Development Program of University of Waterloo to educate and raise the profile of cooperatives in accountants, lawyers, business advisors, and grassroots organizers. So that's in the pipeline right now. We're going to proceed probably with or without funding for that. And then just a comment on the succession, Marcelo mentioning the succession of co-op developers into the next generation. I myself just recently joined the Canada's Emerging Cooperators Committee within the CMC, so the CEC and the CMC, and I do plan on advocating quite strongly in that position to make that part of our core mission over the next several years. I myself am an emerging co-op developer. I've taken some co-op development courses thanks to Co-op Zone, and I'm friends with a lot of quickly retiring co-op developers, and I want to be able to literally purchase their knowledge out of their brain before they retire for good and we lose all of that capacity.
Thank you, Marcelo. Meg, and it's linked to that capacity issue. Do you think that bringing back the folk school Antigonish movement will help address awareness and capacity issues?
Yeah, well, the Antigonish movement hasn't really, the legacy continues, right? And that's in the rich adult education, the rich connection between the cooperative movement, the social economy in Canada, and adult education. So I think there are in Canada. I mean, I don't think we have to. On the other hand, I don't think we have to wait for religious leaders or any other kind of group leaders to kind of educate communities. I think the communities already know implicitly what they need. I think it's connecting the knowledge that already exists within the co-op movement, within the social acquisitions movement and the social economy, with communities, right? With community needs. And I think there's already organizations in place. There are provincial associations, community futures, establishments all across Canada, and other types of community economic development. I mean, the whole notion of community economic development is a Canadian kind of innovation, right? And then, but connecting them also to other communities that have been marginalized. I think this is where we're at right now, like Indigenous communities, New Canadians, marginalized youth. So these are all communities that could benefit highly from the capacities of the social economy and cooperatives, but that there's a disconnect right now, right? And frankly, I would just want to also recognize that this is partly by choice because from these marginalized communities, because the history of co-ops in Canada, while rich, we can't forget that yes, Antigonish existed, but also how co-ops were used in settler colonialism in Canada. So this is a part of our history too. We can't neglect this, but it doesn't mean that this is who we are now and that we can become something else, right? And we have been. So I think that extending out to and working with other Indigenous communities and other marginalized groups is also very vital here in this discussion. And this is what's kind of missing today was that piece, although Meg mentioned it. And certainly we haven't seen many conversions to co-ops in Indigenous communities, although we do have a case of a fishery in northern Manitoba, Wabong Fisheries, that was a conversion, and that we're tracking, and it's one of our cases. But there aren't many, right? There could be so much more in this story. So we don't have to. So my answer to that is we don't have to wait for another Antigonish. The movement Antigonish already showed us what to do, and we just continue and expand with the knowledge that currently we have into these new communities that are currently, that we could currently work with that have been marginalized otherwise.
Thank you, Marcelo.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the time, and I think it's a good takeaway message here. It's we have to continue increasing awareness. We have incredible, rich content here, incredible movements to advance, like incredible efforts from the L3 efforts to bring awareness and gathering. I myself have participated in some of those workshops, and I was really amazed by the wide range of stakeholders that were on the table they were interested in having that conversation. So I feel personally very encouraged. I really can't wait to see this movement to continue to increase awareness, and I look forward to reading all the case studies. So we'll follow up on that. We'll continue our discussions and our collaborations. And I want to very much thank you for joining us today and for allowing this partnerships to happen. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Marcelo. And thank you, Fiona. And thank you to all the participants who are here today with us. And a very special thank you for Olivier, who has managed to interpret such complex knowledge, but we're excited to make this available in French and have the feedback from a wide range of stakeholders. So again, thanks. And I wish you all a wonderful afternoon. Stay safe and healthy. And let's continue to have these conversations. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nadia.